Welcome to the Kelly Cardenas podcast, where attitude is everything. On today's show, I've been looking forward to this since it got scheduled. I was up like on Christmas Day today, and I was thinking, how am I going to introduce? But this is the first person that I've had on the show that needs absolutely no introduction. I could just say his name, and everyone in the world that has a pulse will know who this young man is. But I want to list off a couple of things. So he has represented the number one pick in the NFL draft 8 times. He's represented Troy Aikman, Steve Young, Ryan Leaf, over 300 pro athletes, over 60 first-round picks, and a little known guy that you guys possibly might know that, he's doing okay in the NFL right now by the name of Patrick Mahomes, but also was the inspiration for the movie Jerry Maguire. And the most important out of all of this is he is my brother's number one inspiration, and that's why I'm so excited to have on the show today, Mr. Leigh Steinberg, the greatest of all time.
Thank you so much.
So I want to get the particulars out of the way too. If you want to follow him and you don't have if you don't know who he is, you don't have a computer and you've never been on this earth before, Leigh Steinberg or Steinbergsports.com. You could check him out at Leigh Steinberg on Instagram and LinkedIn, and you could search him, Google him. It'll pop up right off the bat, which I think is amazing. He told me that his title is the Chief Poobah. Can you tell me why this title, Mr. Steinberg, is so important to you of being the Chief Poobah?
There are no titles that are so important to me at all. I'm just Leigh.
So, Leigh, let me ask you this: when people look at you, I mean, you're a Michael Jordan, a Kobe, you look at a LeBron, you look at a Tom Brady, you look at all these athletes that are the greatest of all time. You are the greatest at what you do that's ever lived, right? Talk to us a little bit about your philosophy and how you were able to get to that point. And did you even focus on it early on?
My dad raised us with 2 core values. One was treasure relationships, especially family. And the second was to try to make a meaningful difference in the world in a positive way and help people who couldn't help themselves. So the whole goal I've always had is to be the best son, the best brother, the best father that I can be, a good husband, and a friend to people when it's inconvenient to be a friend, when it may cost you something to be a friend. That's true friendship. And also to try to help people who can't help themselves in the world. So I knew that in life that was going to be the goal. And my dad used to say to me, if you're looking for someone to make a change, if you're looking for someone to fix a problem, and you keep waiting for the amorphous they, older figures, political figures, people in authority, he would say, you could wait forever. The they in life is you, son. You are the they. So it imbues one with a sense of responsibility, whether it's the environment and climate change or sex trafficking or domestic violence or racism or bullying, to try to find a way to work that will somehow address those issues. And I fell into the representation of athletes, but I saw the opportunity to do some good with it.
So when you say that you fell into the representation of, can you take us through that? Because most people can't bridge the gap. I've got a chance to be with you in some pretty intimate areas, like at Prosperity Camp that we were at. There's probably about 40 people. There's very few people that get a chance to be around a group of 40 with you, my sir. So, but what I loved about it is when we went to Secret Knock and it's 250, 300 people, you were exactly the same. You were this guy that wasn't beating your chest. And most people look at it and say like, oh my gosh, he's the greatest of all time. How does he get there? And you're saying that you fell into the thing that you're the greatest of all time. Can you talk to us about that?
Sure. I really thought I would be a great lawyer, a defender of the downtrodden, and that would be what I would do. I was going to Cal Berkeley in the late 60s, a very different time from today. And the governor of California was Ronald Reagan, and I was student body president. So I learned everything I ever needed to know about the art of negotiation from dealing with Governor Reagan, because we kept demonstrating and he kept cracking down. And every time that happened, I would have to intercede. I was a dorm counselor in an undergraduate dormitory, and they moved the freshman football team into the dorm. And one of the students was Steve Bartkowski, the quarterback. And in 1975, he became the very first player picked and selected in the first round of the overall NFL draft. And I hadn't taken a job yet. I had traveled after law school for about a year and a half. And he ended up asking me to represent him. So there I was, brimming with legal experience, never having practiced before. And I had the first pick in the first round of the draft. And we got lucky. There was a competing football league, so we signed the largest rookie contract in history. And at that point, what I saw was the way in which veneration and idol worship was put upon athletes and communities across the country, how they were the movie stars, they were the celebrities. And I thought, if an athlete would go back and retrace his roots to the high school community, set up a scholarship fund, work for a Boys and Girls Club or a church, they could lay down roots. And then at the professional level, set up a charitable foundation with leading business figures, political figures, all of whom could help assist on executing a program. So that was like Warwick Dunn, the running back for Tampa and Atlanta, putting the 175th single mothers in the first home they'll ever own by making the down payment and moving the family in. It's Patrick Mahomes with his 15 in the Mahomes program. So I created a practice around the concept of giving back and the athlete triggering imitative behavior. So Lennox Lewis, the heavyweight champion of the world in boxing, did a public service announcement that said, real men don't hit women. And that could do more to trigger behavioral change in rebellious adolescents than 1,000 authority figures ever could.
Now, Leigh, when you started in on this, because this is, it's blowing my mind that you said, I stumbled into this. Steve Bartkowski happens to be with you at school. There was another Steve that you didn't mention that was at your school too. We'll talk about him in a second. But this is not a popular way of going about it, because most of the time people are just thinking about how much money can I get and how quickly can I get it. And especially in the athlete sense, you're not going to have a long career. The span is very short. So how were you able to overcome, this concept, which is phenomenal, but this is legacy, lifetime. And a lot of times people can't think past today. How were you able to convince them as you went along to be able to buy into this kind of concept?
The enemy for athletes is self-absorption. It's living in a little homunculus of other athletes and not having any awareness of their role in the world. So this gives the athlete an opportunity to show their non-athletic skills and learn how to network and learn how to make a difference and leave a legacy on issues that are really important to them. So the key was to get them to think about whether it was at-risk kids or disease someone in their family had or something personal that would inspire them so they'd put some passion into it. And so the most important skill, I think, in life is listening. It's being able to cut below the surface with another person and understand their value system, priorities, and their greatest anxieties and fears and greatest hopes and dreams. So it involved being quiet and still and creating a sense of trust around an athlete so that they would share their intimate feelings. If I can put myself in someone else's heart and mind and see the world the way they see it, then it's possible to navigate through life gracefully. But you have to cut below the surface responses and get into someone's, not what they think you want to hear, but who they really are as a human being. So it was by doing that that I tried to profile and attract athletes who would be open and interested in doing this. And if they weren't, they had many other choices.
So talk to us too, because again, like when we go back to it, when you're first starting off with Steve Bartkowski, this is not, number one, is you're a pioneer in what it is that you're doing, right? And it's probably not that popular. I mean, you've got a law. You at the time, you're either did you have your law degree at the time?
Yes.
Okay.
So I graduated. I was the class of '73. I traveled for a year. And then came back, and I had a number of legal offers, but I never got to take them because Bartkowski asked me to do it. And there really wasn't a regulated, standardized field of sports agentry at that point. Teams didn't have an obligation to talk to agents, so you could call up the Cincinnati Bengals and they'd slam down the phone and say, "We don't deal with agents." So it was really embryonic at that stage. It's become much more sophisticated and complex since.
So talk with us about, for those of us out there that hear on ESPN, it comes across the ticker that says, Patrick Mahomes signs for $500 million. Everyone at home is like, oh wow! In our limited knowledge of the game, the normal sports fan is like, oh wow, he went to him and said, look, I'm not playing unless you give me $500 million. And then they said, well, you're really valuable, so we're gonna give you that check. And then everyone rides off into the sunset. Can you take us behind the scenes? Because I know that's not what happens, but that's what most people think happens. How does it actually happen, Leigh?
Well, for a veteran player, you're looking at comparables. In other words, how many years of service, what level of performance, who would you compare them to, what's the market? And so, and when you have a player who's really at the top of the game, you have the opportunity to set the market. So you're negotiating with a big packet of materials showing how talented the player is, how prolific he is, and what that ought to equate to in terms of value. And in the case of Mahomes, it was a 10-year contract. And he wanted to do that so that there'd be no doubts about who was going to be the quarterback for the long term of the Kansas City Chiefs, and to create stability and to create a team that could go repetitively back to the Super Bowl. So a contract in football has a signing bonus in it, and then it has some number of years of salary, and then the question is it guaranteed? Is the money paid if the player has a career injury, or is the money paid if the player is not very talented? So that's the concept of guarantees and whether or not you'll actually see the money. So it's a discussion, and I have to put myself in the heart and mind of the owner and general manager of the team to understand what their needs are and if you can create a win-win scenario where both parties achieve their goals and everyone walks away happy, that's the ideal negotiation.
let's dig into that part. You just said if both parties walk away happy, then it's a successful negotiation. This is contrary to what, I mean, almost everything that you've said today is contrary to every single thing that you hear. Most people say in negotiation, you go in, you're a shark, you're going to get yours. If you don't get yours, then someone else is going to take it. How have you been able to stay in this, I mean, and this calm demeanor, guys, that you're watching and that you're listening to? This is Leigh. Like, I saw him in a large place where he spoke and everyone was clamoring. He had to get in a corner because everyone is going after him for autographs, for pictures, for all this stuff. And he's still exactly the same. How do you stay in that realm when the world is saying, you got to get this, you got to get that, or else you're not going to get it?
I think it's critical in life, in critical situations, to compartmentalize, adopt a quiet mind, tune out all the externals, and be able to elevate your level of performance and focus in those critical situations. And it involves putting every ounce of energy into this moment. So you and I are sharing an experience, and I don't know what time it is right now. I'm not sure what day of the week it is. It doesn't matter. I'm not looking at my phone. I'm not worrying about what I'm going to do next. Every ounce of energy is put into this moment. And if you can do that moment by moment through life, you'll get the most satisfaction and fulfillment out of it.
So Leigh, when we were talking about it earlier, and you were talking about the Bartkowski part, and you had the law offers, you had gone to law school. How were you able to deal with? Because I'm sure there was people in your life that were saying, Leigh, like, you've got this career, this law career. You paid the money, you went to school, you did all this stuff. Why are you playing and going and doing this stuff in sports? You need to be a lawyer. Did you deal with that part of it? And how did you, if you did deal with it?
Well, first of all, of course, I always have been a lawyer, and I'm a sports lawyer, and it's just another field. So there's no real difference between if I was negotiating for a company that created pig iron or some other commodity, and I was negotiating for that. I happen to have individuals as athletes, and I really tried to define a career that would be everything I like to do. You know, if I wanted to write a book, I could write a book. If I wanted to spend 40% of my time working on charitable programs, I could do that. If I wanted to work on movies, I could do that. If I wanted to save the world, I could do that. So I just tried to create every fun thing that I liked in the world and call it somehow a job.
So with your pop, I mean, he seems like a very wise guy, as he was teaching you those things as a kid. And now my pop is very wise. Like, he's probably the wisest guy that I know. But there was a time where I resisted those things. Was it when you were a kid, Leigh, were you resisting these things, or were you like, wisdom Leigh all the time? Or as a kid, were you a knucklehead?
Always tried to listen, always tried to soak in whatever knowledge I could get or perspective from other people. I just think life's a learning experience. I mean, I read 6 newspapers a day. I read 3 books a week. I think you never stop learning. And what's important to me is to know what's important to you and what you're all about. I mean, I'm being interviewed right now, but normally I'd be focused on who you are and what you're about and what unique perspectives that you have about life, so that it's a sense of curiosity about other people and caring about them and caring about their welfare.
So talk to us too about your pop. When you were talking about him, talk to us about the relationships that he had. I mean, his relationship with your mom, the things that really impacted you, because a lot of times our dads will say something, but then we watch them do something that will impress on us even more. Can you talk to us about some specific things that you saw your parents do that taught you even more than the words that they said?
So it was I was a baby boomer born, in the years after World War II, and it was really unpopular uh, to Japanese Americans had been unfairly treated and put into camps. So when they came out, um, my dad hired a Japanese gardener. Well, there were neighbors who said, how can you do this? Those guys fought us. And my dad was pretty clear that Japanese Americans were Americans and were entitled to all the respect of that. And I watched my dad fight for human relations. I watched him do his dissertation on the Human Relations Council of Southern California. I watched him uh, fight for fair housing. I watched him do all these things. So I saw how a person's life, he was a teacher, then a high school principal, but his avocation was being president of the City Human Relations Commission. So I watched him do those things, which were brave things. I've learned about him writing an editorial when he was in the Marine Corps against the displacement of Japanese Americans. So I saw that he had courage and he had convictions, and I knew I wanted to be like that. At home, we actually had he had a great relationship with my mother, and I saw them affectionate with each other, which I think is important. And I saw the fact that they loved each other, and we had certain rules in our family that, for example, you couldn't go to bed mad, that you needed to settle, you needed to learn a fair way to fight, which was you could talk about someone's behavior, that you didn't like this behavior, but you couldn't personalize it to them. Like, you never, you always, you're this. You couldn't do that. That was off limits. And so it made dispute resolution much easier. I learned to apologize. I learned to be honest. If you spilled the milk in our family, you weren't in trouble. But if you lied about spilling the milk, then you were in big trouble. And we actually had a family club called the Muttonheads. And somebody was always the president. I had three brothers. So the five of us, someone was president, vice president, secretary, sergeant at arms, treasurer. And we learned how to Robert's Rules of Order, and we had new business and old business. So I really was somewhat trained politically in back in those days. And my dad didn't care what we did for a living as long as we tried to be of service to other people. So that was sort of what I learned. And so it's if I feel like I've offended somebody or done something wrong, I think every day when I get home about, was I fair, was I honest, and the rest of it. And if I've ever felt like I wronged someone, I would run them down the street to apologize. No pride there. You want to have a clear conscience in terms of how you interact with other people.
Well, Leigh, for a person like from the outside, when a person's listening right now or they're watching you, they're seeing a person in their eyes, from their perspective, that is literally jumping from mountaintop to mountaintop. I mean, we talk about the Troy Aikmans of the world or the Steve Youngs of the world, or you were talking about the Bartkowski, and we move it on to Patrick Mahomes and being able to see those kind of things. People learn from that, but what I learned from my brother, who you did a video for, and we'll talk about here in a second, but what I learned from my brother is more people learn from your missteps and the challenges you had than the things that you succeeded at. Can you talk to us about some of the negotiation missteps and maybe where you left things on the table and learned a valuable lesson?
There was a time when I had a player with the old St. Louis Cardinals that are now the Arizona Cardinals. And the owner was being unfair. He was offering less than the market value to this draftee. And so the press covers these negotiations. And so I started criticizing him and saying if he was using the money he's not paying my client to drop ticket prices, I would understand, but he's not. He's being unfair, and the thought was somehow there'd be a people's revolution, like walking to the Kremlin, uh, to support this player I had. But I realized that this fellow was being offered $2 million instead of four, and to most people, that was more money than they would ever see or think of. So all I was doing was pushing away fans, and all I was doing was making the owner more stubborn. So that was the last time I ever negotiated publicly, because I understood that behind the scenes, it's possible to say all sorts of things, but every person has pride, every person has ego, and what you don't want to do is push someone up against the wall in a way where they'll just be defensive. So I learned that. In my personal life, there came a time I had lived a very charmed life, but there came a time where my father died a long death of cancer, and it was really painful to watch, and I couldn't help him. And my two sons were diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa, which is an eye disease that leads to total blindness. And we lost a home near the beach to mold, and I felt powerless, and I turned to alcohol, and I finally hit the point where I said, I can't live this way. So I vowed at that point, and this is in 2010, that if nothing else in my life, I would be sober and be a good parent. And if anything else came about, that would be fine. And so that was 12 years ago, and I've had 12 years of continuous sobriety, and importantly, have been a good father to my children. And then we were able ultimately to rebuild a agency and to come back to sort of slightly dominate the industry. But the key is resilience. Life will push you back. Life will knock you over. Life will break your dreams and expectations at times. So that's going to happen. The question is, can you be resilient? In I was raised in an optimistic environment, so we always think a happy ending is going to happen. That's even though there was wreckage in front of me, that if there was a barn filled with defecation, and that's all you could see, somehow I always believed there was a pony in there somewhere if you could just find him. So it's all about resilience, and it's about optimism and a sense of proportionality. Because what I realized was I wasn't a starving peasant in Darfur. Didn't have the last name Steinberg in Nazi Germany in the late 30s. I wasn't crippled. I didn't have a disease. So what excuse did I have not to live up to my dad's admonitions?
So let's go to when you said slightly dominate. I love, because in everything you're humble. Every single thing, even when, again, people were clamoring for you at the Secret Knock, and I came up and I didn't want to be that guy, but my brother, like, you are the inspiration for my brother Rob to even be in his profession. He went to law school. He has always I mean, your path and what you did really inspired him and inspires him every single day. And so when I hear this, I love the fact of the humility, and for those of you listening, it's real. I've experienced it. I've experienced it like person to person. The question that I have for you is, when you were coming back, you saw something in Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech that no one else saw. I mean, there were some people that saw it, but no one could understand what it was going to be. Take us into the mind of the Leigh Steinberg that says, I'm going to go after. What are some of the traits that you saw that you knew that you could build upon?
So Patrick Mahomes was playing at Texas Tech, and Texas Tech had a very porous defense, and they were giving up 50 points a game. So he felt obligated to score on almost every play. So that led people to misperceive him as somehow being a gunslinger, undisciplined, and the rest of it. But my thought was that he could do a 3, 5, 7-step drop, which is not an offense that they play. And many players in college are playing the spread. And when he got a chance to take the ball under center and not be behind on every single play, that his skills, which is a freakish arm, a incredibly grounded attitude, a leadership capability, a memory that allowed him to remember every play, that he would be a franchise quarterback. And let's call that someone that you can win because of rather than with, someone a franchise could build around for 10 to 12 years, and someone who, importantly, as we said a minute or two ago about our own lives, in critical moments, in adversities, thrown a couple interceptions, the crowd's booing, the center's looking at him like he's on hallucinogens for making the plays he's making. What does he do now? And again, most games in sports are close. About a third of them are blowouts, but it always comes down to that fourth quarter, the last drive, and what do you do then? And it was clear to me that he was someone that was so bright and so gifted that he would be able to dominate at the next level, playing in a pro set offense.
So give us some insight too. I mean, you worked with Steve Young, and Steve Young went through a time when the Montana years, and then he was coming in, he was going to get a shot. What were some of the things that you were working with Steve Young through as he's going through that? Because most people don't see the emotional side. They don't see the personal side. They just see like, oh man, my man Montana is out, or they're giving him the shaft, or they're benching, Steve Young, they should put him in beforehand. So we're just seeing all this outside, but you're seeing the interior. What are some of the things that you were helping him through, or that you were there for him with, that most people don't understand?
Well, Steve was someone who treasured competition and involvement. And so the last thing in the world that was good for his psyche was sitting behind the best quarterback in football. And there were so many other teams that Steve could start for. So when Bill Walsh, who was the coach then, had talked to us about coming, he said, well, Montana was going to retire because of back problems. And so I lived in the Bay Area at that point. I knew what an icon Montana was. That would not have been where Steve Young would have gone, except that we were told that Montana was going to retire. Well, not only does he not retire, but the presence of this young first pick in the draft franchise quarterback behind him made him competitive, and he played his best years yet. So one of the things that Steve did was he went back to BYU and went to law school. And he had to have something else in his life to occupy him, or, he would have gone stir crazy. And there were points at which I said, why don't we just get you traded? Because first of all, you're wasting your years of at your peak sitting behind someone. Second of all, when you do take over, you're going to have the problem every little brother does behind a talented big brother, which is that in the fans' minds, the first time you throw an interception, well, Joe wouldn't have done that. The first time you lose a game, well, Joe won every single game he ever played in. He never threw an interception. And in the mind of fans, you're competing against, a legend. And but Steve thought there was something special about the San Francisco experience, that it might take him a year or two longer, but it would be unique when he got there. And he didn't listen to me about being traded, and he had and now he's in the Hall of Fame.
So Leigh, when you were talking, I want to go back a little bit. When you were talking about going through the bouts with alcohol, it affecting your family, and then there was a comeback. Can you talk to those people either that are in it or that are in the mix right now? Because we had alcoholism in our family, and a lot of times the shame comes in, and the shame comes in so much that it almost overpowers the person that's utilizing the alcohol, and it overpowers them to a point of like, well, what's the use anyway? The shame comes in. How were you able to overcome the shame? And what would you say to a person who's coming through it right now?
That if you're out there and struggling, depressed, without hope, because of a problem you're having with an addictive substance, um, there's help available. I worked a 12-step program with a unique fellowship. My sobriety is something that has many different authors to it. It's got many different helpers. It's got many different key people who were there for me at critical times. I did not do this alone. And I've been there, and you can get through it, but you have to break denial. Alcoholism and other addictions are problems that tell you you don't have a problem. So you have to confront the fact. And when I'm sitting on my deceased father's bed in Los Angeles, and my only thought is, where can I find more vodka? Then you've got to hit a point at which proportionality takes over. We live in a free country with a high standard of living. I didn't fight in the army to earn that. And we've been given many blessings. And so it's trying to get perspective back, trying to see the glass as half full, trying to know there's light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm not special. I just found a program that works.
You are special, Leigh. I want you to know that everyone out there is like, no, he's special. I mean, it's amazing, but again, the humility part of it. So let's go to your parents too, because I used to think, when my mom passed away about 3 years ago, about 3.5 years ago, I used to think that I was going to get to a point and be like, yo, mom, I got you the house, or yo, mom, I got you the car. And if I got the chance to speak to her today, I would tell her, thank you for scratching my back and telling me I was awesome. And that's it. What would you tell your mom and dad now? I mean, you could list off all the people that you represented. You could list off all those things. But what would you say to them if you got a chance to be able to spend time with them right now?
Well, my mother had a stroke, so she's not currently with us. And my father, as I said, died of cancer. I'd say, Dad, thank you for the values and unconditional love that you installed in me, and the sense that I was born and destined to make a difference in the world. Thank you for all the different things you taught me. Thank you, Mom, for my love of movies and books and entertainment. But thank you for the values. And even though when we were young, 5 of us lived in, a house and used one bathroom, and I shared a room with my 2 brothers, and we didn't have a lot of money, thank you for never making us feel poor. Thank you for always finding what was important and providing it. So we never felt that way. And I laugh when I see people with torn jeans today as a fashion statement, because when our jeans got torn, we'd have to put patches on them. But I would say thank you for all these things, and I hope I've made you proud. I hope I've lived up to what your expectations were. And I tell my dad, look, when Secretary of State Madeleine Albright and I had set up a program called Adopt a Minefield, and we took landmines out of Cambodia, Angola, and Mozambique. you were part of that when we set up an anti-racism program that would spot skinheads and hate groups and trained 10,000 volunteers in the fight against hate. That's you living through me.
Wow. So what advice would you give to a young aspiring agent, that they're wanting to get into that game? Because the game is completely different. What advice or what counsel would you give to in that realm?
Study psychology, because at the end of the day, if you can understand why people act the way they do, why they make the decisions they do, and understand that, again, if you can put yourself into another person's heart and mind, then you'll be able to recruit players, to negotiate contracts, to be someone in player maintenance mode, client service mode. But it's all going to be about people. And at the end of the day, hone your listening skills, and the classes you take don't matter at the end of the day. Your ability to read other people and to respond is what's critical. And if you can do those things, then the rest of it will come easy. And even though it's a hyper competitive field, and the odds would say that most people don't make it, that doesn't mean that some people don't make it. So the point is, understand what the real challenges are and deterrents to your being successful, and figure out a way around that. You can do, you can live through your heart's desire and have a fulfilling life.
So how is it Lee, when you represent players from all different teams, is it hard for you on Sunday? Oh, because I have a team. Like, I'm a Tennessee Titans fan. I've been an Oilers fan my whole life since I was 6. I believe I'm still the only one. And I am I'm in. But you really can't have a team. How is it on Sunday when you're watching? Because if your player is playing against your other player, are you just happy for them that way? Or do you sometimes lean one way or the other?
What you'd like to do is get as many players as you can into the playoffs and Super Bowl. So the only rooting would be that the experience of being in the Super Bowl or in the playoffs is so unique. If you think of the players as little markers on a chessboard, you'd like to get them as far to the other side as they could. When it comes to individual games, and I'm so happy to hear you're an Oiler fan. I had Warren Moon, I had Ray Childress, I had David Williams, who was the offensive lineman who the Baby Gate was named after because he didn't leave his wife after she had one of their kids to go play a game. But at any rate, I'll root for each player to do well. So we have Darrell Henderson on the Rams. So I'm just rooting for him individually, and he scored 2 touchdowns on Sunday. And Mahomes comes back after a tough first half to lead a drive. And we had 2 quarterbacks in that game. Taylor Heineke started for the Redskins. So you're rooting like crazy for your players. But you're not rooting very loudly in a stadium. You have to be internally excited.
Lee, tell me your best not known Warren Moon story. And this one's just for me. Because the reason why I'm a Houston Oilers fan, my dad bought me a jacket when I was 6 years old. I think it was because they were on sale, because at the time the Oilers were not good. And my brother was a big Rams fan. He's a huge Rams fan. And I think they bought the Rams jacket for him, and it was buy one, get one free. And this one was on the rack. And I became an Oilers fan and stayed with them. I've had a lot of pain and therapy in my life. But tell us an unknown Warren Moon story.
Well, Warren Moon, when he was in Edmonton, had a chocolate chip cookie company, and it was called W. Moon's Chocolate Chippery. And he used his mother's recipe, and he baked cookies, and he ended up selling them, and they became a big hit in Canada. And then he brought them back with him to the United States, and he ended up selling that company to Mrs. Fields Cookies. Um, but I think the most inspirational Warren Moon story is teams were trying to change his position as he came out of the University of Washington, and they were trying to have him be a defensive back, or a defensive back, or a running back, or a wide receiver, because there was a fair amount of prejudice against a black quarterback at that time. And I said, "Well, do you want to change your position?" He said, "Never. I was born to play quarterback." And that was that.
Well, Leigh, I'm telling you, you have been absolutely phenomenal. I can stay on all day, but I just want to respect your time. The whole reason why I started the podcast is because of my two kids, Maddox and McKenna. And I wanted to take the most iconic people in the world, like yourself, the greatest of all time. And I wanted to show my kids that now it's Uncle Leigh, if I can have them call you that. Now,
Sure.
Uncle Leigh is not Leigh Steinberg, the man who is the best in the world. He's Uncle Leigh, who is humble, who listens, and makes sure that people on both sides of the negotiation get exactly what they want and walk away happy. And I wanted to take a person like yourself, and I wanted to show them that. So Maddox is 10, McKenna is 12. What advice, Uncle Leigh, would you give to Maddox and McKenna? And if you could use their names, it would be awesome.
So, Madison and McKenna, I've been privileged to spend some time with your father. Um, Figure out internally what it is that makes you happy, and prioritize the things in life you think will make you happy, and then make decisions based on those priorities. So figure out how you're going to spend your time when you have a choice about where to go to school, what school you'll do, what you'll do for play. But understand how unique both of you are as human beings, and follow your own dreams and your own conscience.
Well, Leigh, you have been absolutely phenomenal. I wish that we would have had some people on here calling in questions, although you would have had to stay on here for 24, 48 hours. You would have been on here for 7 days, continuing to answer the questions. But it is such a pleasure to see a person in the world that is doing the right things for the right reasons, and the right things keep happening, even though it's not the perfect circumstances as you shared with us. But the fact that you continue to make this world a better place, I just think is absolutely phenomenal. And I just want to thank you for being on the show.
Well, thanks so much for sharing this time with me. You've been a good interviewer.
Well, thank you so much. I am going to ask you for, I don't ask the crew for very much, but at some point I would like to have another episode with you, because I think that you are so absolutely profound. For those of you out there that are listening, this is the time where you click the links, you do all the things that you know you need to do. And what I would suggest is that you share this. If you got any value from Leigh, from Mr. Leigh Steinberg, the greatest of all time, which I know all of you did, that you make sure and you share this with every single person that you possibly can. Leigh, you're officially off the hot seat.
Cool. All righty.